Hello everyone. Today we are going to assemble the Flicker Fluorescent Lighting Kit. There are a couple of things that you need to provide. First and foremost is obtain the kit from HauntLabs.com. It'll be shipped to you. Contains almost everything you need with the exception of some of the larger items. You also need an old fluorescent light fixture. You'll want to make sure that the container or the part that holds the ballast is also large enough to hold the power supply and controller board that's included with your kit. So just kind of eyeball that one up front. And then you'll also need two of these polycarbonate fluorescent light tube protectors. They're available at pretty much every big box hardware store, Menards, Home Depot, Lowe's for a couple of bucks, 3 or 4 at the most. So what we're going to do is we are going to disassemble this fixture and get rid of the stuff that we don't need. And then we are going to paint the outside of these tubes and finally assemble the kit into the fixture. Today we are going to be using this Rust-Oleum paint and primer product. I chose a yellow color just because I like the old yellowish tint of those fluorescent lights from the 70s. So you can really pick any light color that you want. If you paint the tubes black or something dark, it's probably not going to work very well for you, but lighter colors, yellows, blues, even just a flat white is perfect. I chose this because it bonds to plastic, which is what the polycarbonate tubes are. So we'll want to make sure that whatever paint you choose does bond to plastic. You don't want it chipping off in the long run. Here are the tools that you're going to need to assemble your Flicker Fluorescent Lighting Kit. First thing you need is a drill or drill press with a 1/4 inch drill bit and a drill bit somewhere around the size of 9/64. Just kind of, this drill bit is used to drill the holes for the machine screws that are included with the kit. So just find something close that won't let the head of the machine screws pass through it, and you should be fine there. But 9/64 is the official size. The other thing you're going to want is a 8mm nut driver or an 8mm open end and boxed end wrench. A pair of needle nose pliers with the cutter is handy. If you don't have a pair of needle nose pliers with a cutter, a pair of needle nose pliers and a separate angle cutter or wire cutter or something like that, that's going to be very valuable. You may need a Sharpie. You'll need a number 2 Phillips screwdriver and a flat blade screwdriver. It may also be beneficial to have a smaller flat blade screwdriver if you're going to be prying things apart with it. Other than that, you'll probably also want a little bit of Scotch tape, a stick of some sort that's about 4 feet long. It can really be anything, guys. It can be a broom handle. And then you'll also want a length of wire or string that is a little longer than 4 feet long as well. I prefer the wire just because it's a little stiffer and you can manipulate it as you're sending it through the plastic tubes of the for the lights, but you know, whatever you happen to have on hand. That's really all you're going to need. All right, let's go over what is included in your Flicker Fluorescent Kit. Your kit will show up in a bag similar to this, and yours will be sealed, but mine is not because I have not sealed it yet. So we have a power cable that has been cut and stripped. There are 2 pieces to it. There's a small green wire, which is used for grounding your light fixture to the power supply if your light fixture has a ground. There are 2 packages of LED strips that are pre-soldered and stripped. One has a green wire, one has a red wire. There's the controller and power supply assembly. The controller and power supply are already wired to each other. There should be approximately 8 zip ties. Your quick start guide. Your drill hole template. And this little bag that contains four larger plastic pieces and 4 smaller plastic pieces. The larger ones are the inserts for the end caps. These are your washers for the outside. Just kind of helps hold everything together. There are 2 machine screws that have 3 regular nuts and a nut with a nylon lock washer embedded into it. 2 of those, these are used for mounting the controller to your light fixture. There is 1 electrical cable stress relief connector. There are 4 1.5 or 1.25 long machine screws. A variety of wire nuts. The 3 larger ones are meant for the power supply assembly, and the smaller ones are meant for hooking up the light tubes to the controller. And there is a small tube of super glue, which will be used to glue the end pieces into the tube end caps. So that's really it. Let's get started. To prepare the fluorescent tube protectors, first thing you want to do is just simply remove the end caps from each end. And if there happens to be a piece of paper, you can discard that. We're going to use these next, but first let's get the tubes painted and drying, because the glue that we use on these end caps and the paint here are the 2 longest parts of the entire assembly. So we might as well get a jump start and get those done first. Here are the tubes hanging from the ceiling. What I did was just put a couple of screws into the ceiling up there, and then dangled 5-foot lengths of just some Romex wire, and they go down through the tubes. And at the bottom, they make a little hook to keep the tube from falling down while we paint it. You really don't have to worry too much about how you accomplish painting it. Whatever you choose to do is fine. This is just the method I use. And I'm painting 4 tubes today, although we only need 2 for the project. So just have a couple extras ready to go. One thing you do want to be very cautious of when you're spray painting like this is overspray. Here in the garage, I'm not particularly worried about spray paint getting onto things, so I'm not going to hang up any plastic sheeting or anything like that. But if you happen to be painting in a garage that still has a vehicle in it or other things that you don't want your spray paint to fall on, you might want to take a few steps just to protect those items, but drop cloths over them, hang up some plastic or something along those lines. I'm going to do this painting with the camera off and put away for that specific reason, so I will be back after they're done. Alright, so here they are, painted in their nice hideous yellow color, which should work really well. the can of spray paint I had will cover at least 6 tubes, if not 8. I went kind of heavy on these coats just because I didn't want to do a second one later, but you're welcome to do however coats you feel is necessary to reach the end result you're looking for. This paint is pretty thick because it is the primer and the paint in one, so you probably won't have to worry about a second coat. But there they are. We're going to glue up our end caps next and just let everything dry, and then we will come back later and finish the assembly. Inside of the kit is another little bag that includes a bunch of goodies, and the things that we are most interested in right now are the 4 plastic end cap pieces and the little tiny tube of super glue that's included. These little pieces are what is critical to mounting the tube into your fixture cleanly, so it doesn't look like you've modified it too much. Some other products have wires that actually come out of the tubes and back into the end of the casing, and we really just felt that didn't look very good or very professional, so we designed these little guys to kind of handle that problem, and I think it'll end up being pretty nice in the long run. The way this works is, if you notice, I don't know if you can see very well, but there's a FF written in the plastic on this guy. And the reason that's there is so you can make sure that it gets mounted correctly in the cap. This center hole is threaded, so you can put a machine screw through there, and if you put it into the cap backwards, then the threading will be wrong and you just won't be able to insert that screw. So the way you make sure that this is correct is when this plastic piece is inserted into the cap, from the outside looking in, you should be able to read the FF. And it's as simple as that. So I'm going to take a few minutes and glue these pieces in, just like that, and we're going to let everything sit and dry. To open the tube of super glue, you simply screw the cap onto it. It will puncture the seal on the tube and you will be ready to go. And then the top piece comes off. And it really does not take a whole lot of super glue to make this happen. I just put a few little dabs in there. Drop the piece in, and then you have a few seconds before things really start to set up to get it positioned correctly. You will want to make sure that when this thing is in the cap, and not all caps are made quite like this, but this should fit in pretty much anything you find at a retail store. If not, feel free to just kind of cut out the opening a little bit more. This larger hole on the bottom is for the wires to pass through later. It provides a real nice clean installation. So try to make that hole as accessible as possible when you install these things, and of course always make sure the FF is readable when it's inserted into the cap. And then don't forget to put the cap back on your glue. It'll probably never be usable again, but you never know. Sometimes they are. So that is it for the wet parts of this assembly. I'm going to go away and let everything dry for a couple of hours, and then we'll come back, we'll disassemble this fixture, install the controller into it, the lights into the tubes, and we'll be on our way. All right, so at this point we have our end caps all glued up with the little plastic pieces that give us our screw holes where we'll be able to mount the tubes. Those are glued and dried, so I'm just going to set those aside for now. We also have painted our tube protectors the color that we want them to be, so those are also hanging and drying. So at this point we're going to get started by disassembling the existing lighting fixture that you found or purchased. So the very first thing is, if there are bulbs in it, go ahead and take those out, set them aside, dispose of them properly. If you're going to dispose of them, most communities have some program through the local dump or landfill that offers recycling of these tubes. Most times you can take them there for free and drop them off. So go ahead and carefully remove these. Okay, now that we can access the original tube holders, we're just going to take them off. And we're going to clip the wires off of them. They're not needed. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take all four of these and just kind of open it up a little bit. We'll use these as a way to run cabling from the LED strips that'll be in the tube down through this post and back into the fixture. Now that the back is open, you can see the copper pieces. Just pull those out. And the wire stubs will come with it. In order to facilitate this going all the way back down in the fixture, I'm just going to take my needle nose pliers here and break off this little piece right down here. So now there's an opening. These things are kind of brittle, so be careful. They're a tough plastic. Some of them, if it's old enough, might actually be ceramic. So if it is ceramic, you want to be very careful not to destroy the piece. There's all four pieces gutted, cleaned, and the cable chase is made. The next step is going to be to clean up this part right here to allow one of our mounting bolts to go through it. Now that our fixture is taken apart, you just want to make sure that the controller and power supply are going to fit inside your light fixture without any problems. This one has this dome cover that just sits over it like this. So simply by test fitting it, you can see that it's going to fit just fine in there. There's really no significant height problems with the power supply or anything like that. Just before you get too far into things, make sure this is going to fit. So the way this whole tube holding assembly works is we take our existing posts and attempt to drill a hole through the back of them here that lets the machine screw hold the tube directly against the post holder. Unfortunately, because these are very brittle pieces, more often than not, there are going to be instances where when your drill bit falls through, you're going to see this whole piece kind of shatter, and you'll end up with something that looks like this. This isn't really an end-of-the-world problem. This kit will also provide a clear washer that you can use as a backing piece of material to hold everything together. The real thing is just making sure that we get this opening cleared out to allow that screw to pass through. And I'm going to do that simply by breaking it. Just like that. As a side note, if you happen to completely break one of these things, not all is lost. It'll still hold your tube. Really, the screw and the pressure between the two washers are doing most of the work. So again, these are largely for looks of the final product. If your piece is big enough, feel free to use some of the glue to kind of glue it back together. It is now time to start wiring the fixture. Included in the kit is the power cable for the power supply, and it is actually cut into two pieces. There's a little interior pigtail here, and the ends are already stripped for you. There you go. And then there is the other piece here. And the reason we're providing this in two pieces is so it will fit through the hole. The bigger ends won't fit through a standard hole, so we just provide the cable already cut, stripped, ready to go. So the next step is to, in your little bag of things that were included with the kit, find the cable strain relief connector. It's an electrical connector, and it fits in a 1/2-inch knockout on the fixture. This particular fixture already had one exposed, so I'm going to reuse that, but it also has ones on the end and a couple other places, so whatever fits your needs the best. The way you install these is you just simply remove the nut from the back of it, insert it through the hole, screw it down, you can use a pair of needle nose or something like that to twist it tight. Before you get too crazy installing your cabling, you should take a minute to lay out the fixture and kind of plan where your wires are going to go, and to drill a few holes that is needed to mount the controller and the power supply. So the way we're going to do that is first by putting a drill block down underneath. It's just a piece of wood, 2x4, or whatever that you can drill into without damaging the work surface that you're working on. And again, using the 9/64 inch bit in the drill. And this little template that comes with your kit, just kind of mark out where you want things to lay. You should position the controller towards one end of the fixture because the wires coming off of the LEDs are only about 18 inches long, and you'll want to make sure that they reach without needing to find cables to extend those lengths. So I tend to mount it with the controller closer to one end of the fixture and the power supply on the other side. I'm going to remove this rubber band just carefully to allow us to fillet out the board a little bit. You'll also notice that the power supply is pre-soldered on to the board, which is nice. So now that you kind of know where you want things to go, just take your drill bit, find your 2 drill holes on the template, mark a little hole in them with the drill bit so you can use a Sharpie later to mark their positions without damaging the board. Move your controller out of the way temporarily. Using a Sharpie, lay out where your holes are going to be. Now that your holes are marked, just drill them out. Holes from the controller are drilled. Let's revisit this. Place your controller roughly where it's going to sit, and then find a nice little home for your power supply. I'm going to spin it around so all the cabling kind of faces towards where the power supply cord's going to come into. And then again, using a Sharpie, I'm just going to mount on or mark on either side of it a couple of points to drill holes for your zip ties that will hold in the power supply. Alright, took a moment to shake out all the metal shavings. You really don't want those causing any problems later on. And now, let's go ahead and add the hardware for the controller mounting posts. These mounting posts are included in your kits. They're the longer number 6 32 machine bolts. Comes with 3 regular nuts on it and a locking nylon nut. We'll go ahead and separate all the hardware, but be careful not to lose anything. So what we do is through one of the holes we drilled for the controller, insert the machine bolt, take one of the normal washers or normal nuts, tighten it up, repeat the process for the other one. And these are 8mm nuts. Let's go ahead and tighten them up. Now, take a second nut, thread it on, and use it as a jam nut to prevent the other one from coming undone in the future. At this point, it's a very good idea to test fit your cover if that's possible. You'll just want to make sure that the machine screws are not too tall to interfere with the closing of the cover, and these look like it's just fine. The next step is to figure out approximately what depth you want to mount your controller. And again, this is going to vary based on the fixture that you have. But in this case, we can pretty much go straight to the ground on this and be okay. Things to watch out for are the height of this voltage regulator. I ran the cable underneath of it just so the board was in the same orientation as the way I laid it out. And it kind of helps clean up the look of it too. Again, let's test fit things before we get too far. And so far, it looks like everything is fitting quite nicely. I don't know if you'll be able to see down there or not. Get a flashlight here. You may not have this luxury of being able to look at it when it's closed, but we do, so I'm going to show you. Taking the controller back off, you know we have plenty of room to play with. So what we're going to do, these nylon washer nuts are used to create the height at which you want to mount your board off of the fixture. Since this one we have plenty of vertical room, I'm gonna screw these down a good ways. And of course, I'm going to power tool assist a little bit. Again, that was a number 8 an 8mm socket. I don't have a deep well, so I'm going to do the rest here by hand. Just kind of crank it down a little more. So go ahead and screw these down until they're roughly about the same height up. If you want to go all the way down, that's perfectly fine too. Just remember to leave enough space underneath the board for the cable, if you chose to route it the way I did, and make sure that none of the electrical connections touch other pieces of metal. Before we get too much further into this, we need to install our power cable coming into the fixture. So we're going to flip it over, run it through, and leave about 6 inches or so of cable sticking through. Again, depending upon how you mounted this, you may need more, but I would always leave at least 6 inches of the unstripped cable available. And then you just take a Phillips screwdriver and tighten the string relief. At this point, your cable is firmly held into your fixture. Let's turn it back over and we'll mount our controller. Last piece of mounting the controller is using the last 2 regular nuts that were provided to hold the board down onto the posts. You want to be a little careful when tightening these because you don't want to crush the controller board or damage any of the little parts that are on it. And just give it a nice little snug and it'll stay put. Next piece of that puzzle is to plug in the power supply pigtail. And using the included wire nuts, or reusing the old ones, whatever, reconnect the cable for the power supply. If your fixture happens to have a ground screw, this one does not, but if it does, there is a little pigtail included that you can use to hook up the ground from your power supply wires to the fixture. Green to green. Green is your ground. White to white for neutral. And then black and black together for the hot. Some of these cables may have slightly different color schemes depending upon what's available when you order. But just remember to match color to color on this and you'll be fine. Last step here is to use the included zip ties to secure the power supply. I prefer to make sure that the actual zippy connection happens inside the fixture. Again, just for appearance reasons. So I'm going to feed those in from the inside to the outside and back in. And since these aren't quite long enough in this particular installation, that's why we included more. Use a couple extra zip ties to lengthen it and make it work for you. As always, clean up your work, cut off the pigtails here. And then finally, use another zip tie to kind of clean up your cabling. This will help ensure everything stays plugged in over the lifetime of it. And it just makes it look a lot better too. All right, at this point, the controller and power supply is mounted. Our cover will fit. And our next step is to prepare the tubes. All right, everybody, it is now time to install the LED strip into the tubes that we painted earlier. This is by far going to be the most difficult part of the entire assembly, and it's really not too bad if you just have a little bit of patience with the whole process. First of all, remove your light strip. If you are working in a cold environment, you're going to have lots of problems. Bottom line is that these things kind of get firm when they get cold, so if you're doing this outside or whatever and it's kind of chilly, just take a few minutes and go inside to do these. First thing you want to do is simply drop the LED strip through the tube in its entirety. I know I'm doing this off camera for you right now, but gravity helps the situation a lot. In fact, I'm having a hard time getting that done right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tape a little weight to it, and that'll help drop it through. The weight I'm going to use is going to be my socket assembly from earlier, and just a little bit of Scotch tape. This should give it enough weight to fall freely through the tube without getting bound up on itself. And that worked like a champ. Let's spin it around to the other side here so we have a chance of seeing things. The other thing that we need to run through the tube is a string or pull wire or something like that that can be used to pull the adhesive backing off as we go through and adhere this thing into the tube. So that is also now through. So I'm going to remove the weight that I put on. Okay. On the back of the LED strip is a piece of plastic or paper that you have to pull off. This is the backer of the adhesive. Pulling this piece off will expose the adhesive, which allows us to mount it to the inside of the tube. And we're just gonna pull off about 4 or 5 inches, enough where we can do a couple of things. The first thing we want to do is actually attach it to this pull wire so we can pull the tape off as we kind of press the thing down. This particular piece I have is plastic, so I'm going to just tie a little knot in it, and that should suffice. If you receive one with a paper backing, piece of tape works great. But again, really entirely up to you how you want to make this happen. So I got a little knot tied in it. This may not be super obvious, but LED strip, pull wire, and the backing tape. Now, what we need to do is we need to begin adhering this to the inside of the tube. And you'll want to make sure all of your lights are fully inside the tube, but not by too much, because these are cut just shy of 4 feet, so it fits just fine. So start by using your fingers to press down and adhere the light strip to the thing. And go to the other end, look down it, make sure your LED strip is laying flat. If it's not, you probably need to flip it over a couple of times until it is. Okay, may not be able to easily tell, but this thing is laying flat inside of the tube. And now we're just gonna pull off the adhesive tape using the pull wire. So it comes out the other end. Then on the other end, push the tape down flat, push the LED strip down flat until it is adhered on this end. You can remove the backer, and then using a stick or a broom handle or, whatever you have lying around, even a rag on the end of a string would probably help. But gently push down on the LED strip inside of the tube just to kind of get that glue on that adhesive backing to firmly grip onto the inside of the polycarbonate tube. And I just insert the stick to the end and then gently apply downwards pressure as I pull the stick back up and out of the tube. So one tube is now fully complete with LED strip inside. On the other end, the wires are sticking out, and we're ready to do the other one. On flat inside the tube, press against it, wires hanging out the other end, and we're good to go. Next step is to put the caps on the ends. On the ends that don't have any wires coming out, all you have to do is put the cap on. And on the ends that do have wires, feed the wires through the wire hole, the bigger hole of the two, in the cap. Like so. And just attach the cap to the end of the tube. Now I don't glue these caps on, and the reason being is if you ever need to get inside of these tubes again, you'll never accomplish it if you glue them on. So if you're super concerned about the tubes coming off, you can use a piece of electrical tape around the ends to kind of hold things together. But in my experience, the way most fixtures are designed, the end posts tend to hold things pretty tight. So we're good there. Next step is to mount the tubes and hook them up to the controller. And the order of that is probably going to vary a little bit based on the type of fixture that you have. This particular fixture, we're going to have to mount the wires before we mount the tubes because this piece will be difficult to squeeze together and get in when the tubes are fully attached. So the way we're going to deal with that is we're just going to set 2 of these pieces aside on the end, and we're going to come over here and reveal our controller and all of that. Wiring for these is really, really simple. But a few things to keep in mind. We want to hide our wiring as much as possible in these fixtures. It's half the reason why I didn't like some of the other products on the market. So we'll feed the wire through the opening that we created in it and just kind of let it be for now. But you'll want to put these parts on first before we hook up any wires. Again, feed it through the opening. This one actually has a hole in it, so it doesn't even matter. Next, the white wires get joined together from each tube, and they connect to the white wire coming off of the controller. Your kit includes a couple of small wire nuts to help accomplish this. And you might have a couple left over just from design decisions that were made during the development of this first run of kits. You may have a few extra parts. But don't worry about those extra parts. It just means that you'll have a few things to play with when we're done. The red tube wire connects to the red wire on the controller. Twist it with a wire nut. And then finally, the green wire connects to the green wire tube. At this point, all of our electrical connections have been made, and if you wanted to, you could plug it in and test it, which I'm going to do. And you can see both the tubes are lit and flashing. So I think we're ready to finish the assembly. Let's unplug this. Again, because of the way this fixture is mounted, or this fixture is designed, we have to put on the cover first. So just be careful that you don't crush any wires when you're doing this. And again, depending upon your fixture, you may have to do these steps out of order from the way I'm showing you. But you all are very smart people, and I know you will figure this out without any problem. It doesn't really matter which side is which for our tubes. So just go ahead and pick a side for these things. The last step is to take one of these 1.25 inch long machine screws and one of the plexiglass washers that's included, and simply make the connection here to hold things together. You'll want to be a little delicate with the wires until you get everything routed properly. And I do not recommend tightening these down until everything is aligned properly. But, you know, just kind of get it finger tight for now. Oops. I must have forgot to break the channel open on this one. I'm just providing a little channel for the wires to travel through. You could also do this with a Dremel if you happen to have one of those. Again, washer. This particular one, the orientation doesn't matter. There's nothing written on it, and the hole is not threaded in any way. Oops. I guess I didn't use enough glue on this one because the plastic part came undone. Since this is kind of a compression type of system, I'm not going to worry too much about that glue being undone. If you had this problem and you wanted to go and re-glue it, be my guest, but in the interest in getting this video done and ready for you guys, we're just going to note the problem and move on. Again, tightening this to only about finger tight, because you'll want a little play on the other end to get everything all mounted up properly. Turn the fixture around and we will do the exact same thing on the other end. Except this end, we don't have to worry about wires. Had the same problem on this tube where the glue let go. On the day that I'm filming this, it is only about 35 degrees here in Iowa, and it's entirely possible that I just didn't have these guys in a warm enough environment. Even though the space is heated, it's not as heated as well as the house would be, and it may just be related to that. Or maybe I didn't give it enough time to actually cure before we started on this little journey together. Number 2 Phillips screwdriver can be used to drive these things together as well. Okay, on this end, we need to very gently tighten these screws. And then we'll mount our end plate again, which on this fixture conveniently hides the end screws. I was originally going to drill out those holes a bit, so we could access those screws with the screwdriver on the outside, but it turns out the way this light fixture gets assembled, that's not really necessary. And I can't think of a reason why I would need to do it at a haunt after it's been made, so I'm just going to leave it as it is. Finally, on this end, tighten the end screws gently again. We don't want to break anything at this point. Make sure your wires route nicely through the stand-ups here, the tube holders, whatever you want to call them. And then just kind of pack your wires back in underneath the cover here. Be aware that a lot of these fixtures are designed in a way where there's already routes for your wires, and you just have to be careful to make sure things don't get pinched in there. A pinched wire is probably going to be one of the bigger, I don't know bigger, but at least one of the more common reasons why your fixture may not work after assembly. But hopefully nobody has that problem. Sorry if some of this camera work happens, or some of this work happens off camera. It's easier for me to see when it's closer to me. And there it is, our very own flickering fluorescent light fixture. At this point, if you want to do any additional detail painting or making this fixture more dirty, this would be the time to do it. If your LED lights are not mounted in the tube in a place where you really want it to be, you can just kind of gently spin the tubes around to get it lined up, like so. And that's it. Thanks for watching, thanks for buying the kit, and we will see you with our next assembly video.